Next on the program, we have Simone van Nerven. Simone is a Dutch innovation practitioner, and she's the founder at Ribella, from where she's helping organizations to level up their innovation skills and capabilities. Previously, Simone has been leading innovation units at the Dutch airline company KLM and Vueling, and also an innovation catalyst at the luxury firm Chanel. Simone describes innovation as the process where you have your head on the clouds while keeping your feet on the ground. It is about belonging to an organization and being unique at the same time. Innovation is, amongst others, about managing polarities. During her keynote, Simone van Nerven will explore how developing an adaptive mindset helps innovation practitioners navigate through this polarized context. Simone, welcome to IQS TechFest 2021.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here back in Barcelona.
Actually, we are very glad to have you with us. In the midst of the lockdown, we already hosted a talk series session from where you were giving us lots of insights about your experience in the practice of innovation. And already then, it came out the relevance, the importance of developing an adaptive mindset, because actually, well, innovation, it's many things, but one thing is about managing polarities, and that's a difficult task to do, and it requires to have a flexible mindset. So we thought that the subject was so relevant that will be interesting to dedicate a full session just for that. So thanks for joining us from Amsterdam. We look forward your keynote, and after that, we're gonna have a bit of a conversation and ask some questions. So the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks for this great intro. And thanks also indeed for making some time for this side of innovation. So I hope that with some examples, real life examples, but also mixed with some research, you will get some insights why it's so important to have this adaptable mindset. I think I'm sharing my slides. Yes. So let's rock and roll today. Before I start, although Oriol already gave a very great intro, I also want to try to tell a little bit about myself. If I ask my friends and colleagues to describe me, they come up with many things. But one commonality is that they will say that I might be a little bit crazy. So after a long corporate career, 3 years ago, I decided it was time to start my own adventure. And my venture is called Ribella. As Oriol already described or explained, I work in very different industries. I was super excited and happy to live in Barcelona for 2 years in 2018 until 2020. Currently, I have a big client here in Holland in the field of civil engineering. So what they do is they build roads and dikes and and bridges and tunnels and stuff like that. So it's, again, completely different from airlines or luxury fashions, although I also have these clients as well. So it's nice to bring in very different perspectives from different worlds. One of the key things actually I do when I support organizations is I create and I supercharge teams. So this is an example of one team which was not a hierarchical team, but it was from all different departments, and we had a very big mission, is to reduce the turnaround times of KLM. And I was super happy to build this team. And what I like to do when I build teams is, for me, it's all about connection. So create a safe space that people feel open to show themselves and to really be able to make connections with each other. I also highly enjoy to find the hidden talents of people. I see so many people that are so gifted, but it's just not coming out. And what I always like to do is to spend some time with each of my team members and to really get to know, to learn what their passions are, what they do in their spare time, and how we can use that maybe in the projects or the things that we are working on. Always try to get a little bit the craziness out of my teams, of my team members, because I'm also a strong believer that if you don't do that, you also don't get the real big results. Polite teams get polite results. But before I dive into the human side of innovation, I would like to explain a little bit more about how I look at innovation. As Oriol already said in the beginning, for me, innovation is not only about disruptions and moonshots and that kind of stuff, but it's very much about having your head in the clouds while you keep your feet on the ground at the same time. And what I mean by that is I always use the reference of the 3 horizons. It's a McKinsey model, but I try to make it very practical because it's quite a theoretical model. And what I do is horizon 1 is the here and the now. It's where you keep your feet on the ground. It's where you are working on improving the core business and your current business. And horizon 2 and 3 is much more about the greater stuff or the more disruptive stuff, new business models. That's where you have your head in the clouds. And what I try to do is to connect these 3 horizons in a very practical way. Actually, these are polarities, right? So here working in the here and the now and in the future at the same time, it's a polarity to manage. So I try to connect the future with the now, and I do that by creating a vision about the future. So for instance, for Vueling, we created the future airport experience, how it would look like when you were flying in 5 years from now. And we started to experiment with some concepts that were in that future. And we could test with that in the here and the now. So we were bringing the here and the now to the future, which means that people started to feel a little bit more comfortable about the future because it scares a lot of people, right? So what the first things I always do when I build teams is I see this happen a lot, right? Everybody is working at the office behind a computer, but this is not where it's happening, right? So what I did was, what I do is in every team I build, it doesn't matter which company I am in, I push people to go into the field. So go out there, go to your end users, talk to them, so your customers, or in this case, here the pilots are our direct contacts to our customers. So also try to reach out to your colleagues who are in touch with your customers. Listen to them, let them explain their work, let them explain the problems they experience, and really know how to listen and to observe. Don't forget to go to every place. So this guy is loading the luggage, but actually luggage is very important for your customer. So this is also a very important touch point to investigate where problems are. It's an important one for your customer. So reach out and listen, and people are always very passionate to talk about what they are doing. So they're very happy when you do this, when you go out there. My advice is also to do that not only in the hours that are convenient for you, but you have to go out there at the moments that things happen. So when that's in the middle of the night, you have to go out in the middle of the night. I also push people to really get feedback from the start. So in this case, we build concepts, and even if they're just concepts of 2 days and they don't look really well designed technically, still go out there, ask people to look at it, to give feedback, to ask questions. It will really give you a lot of insights on what you're working on. That also means that you have to test a lot in real life. I learn the most when you go out there and just try things out. So this is also, I really need to push my teams because normally they're not really used to go out there. But I really need to push them to do these kind of things. And this one, for instance, is also get feedback from your customers. This is sometimes a little bit scary as well. You have worked on a prototype, you're very proud of it, but the proof of the pudding obviously is in the eating. So what happens when you put it in front of your customers? Do they understand it? Can they work with it? One day I pushed a developer to go out there together with a service designer to listen to his product. And he was convinced that it was a perfect product. But the customers asked some tough questions. So this really opened his eyes, that he said, okay, maybe I should go out there more often, quicker, to prevent myself from a lot of rework to do. So it starts with really go out there and push yourself and push your team to really get in touch with others. And then I think this is one quote I use a lot. So people who know me know this quote and they hear it a lot. But I strongly believe in this. You have to fall in love with a problem and not a solution. And the reason why I say that is if you fall in love with a problem, you have an idea and you find a solution, but it turns out not to work, then it's easier to say goodbye to that solution and try something new. Whenever you fall in love with a solution, you stick with that solution, and it might just not solve the problem. So I urge people to really fall in love with problems and not jump to ideas and solutions too quickly. When you're in the field of innovation, it's also a lot about bringing new perspectives. So I always show this photo and I ask the audience, what is wrong with this picture, or what do you notice? And often people say, hey, the girl sits wrongly on the horse. But actually, I think the girl sits perfectly fine, but the horse is going the wrong direction. So looking at situations, maybe from a different perspective, that might give a very new insight in how to solve a problem or to come up with a new service or solution. I also think with this comes that you should not be too judgmental. And I love this picture, these two pictures actually, because if you look at the left picture, you would draw a completely different conclusion than you would when you see the right picture. So same situation, very different perspective. So this always reminds me of, hey, if I see something, can I look at it from different angles? And let me not be too judgmental too fast. For me, innovation, especially when you also work in Horizon 2 and 3, it's all about picking up the weak signs. So I read a lot, watch videos on YouTube, webinars, all kind of stuff, and different sources of inspiration. And the reason why I do that is because sometimes I pick up signals of topics or technologies or customer behavior trends that I see come back more than once. And that for me is a sign like, hey, something is happening here. So maybe I should deep dive into that. For me, a company, whenever you think in Horizon 2 and 3, that means that you are looking at what is the direction and how can I make sure that I will also be relevant in the future? And then it's all about these kind of weak signs. Also, when you are working in the Horizon 2 and 3 in more futuristic kind of concepts, it's all about daring to ask provoking questions. And you are only successful if you get a response like this. I can still remember the day as if it was yesterday when I asked the CEO of Vueling, hey, do you think we will still be an airline in 10 years from now? And he looked at me like, what the hell are you asking me now? But if you look at the landscape, we're all in a virtual world. So competition from virtual events and virtual experiences is growing. Look at the Louvre. During the lockdown, they had almost the 2 months of lockdown, they almost had the same amount of visitors as they had in the whole of 2019. So there is competition there, and obviously for a company like Vueling, they also should look at trains and hyperloops and maybe even self-driving cars in the future. So you have to ask and dare to ask provoking questions to open up where you are, what your future could be, and maybe explore new business models. When you do that, when you ask provoking questions, it's not that everybody's always super happy with that and that everybody's like, yes, there is Simone again, thank God. So it also means that if you let your people think big and explore new things, they will get a lot of resistance. So it's very important for your team, for your team members, and for yourself, obviously, to learn how to deal with rejection. For me, I always say, I said it yesterday to one of my clients, I said, I don't feel enough pushback, so I don't do my work well. I need to push more, because the moment you feel pushback, that's when you are on the right track. So for me, one of the things that I also like to share in my teams is when you get resistance, that means that sometimes you get a punch in the face, right? And I always say to my team members, don't punch back. Never ever play a zero-sum game. And what I mean with a zero-sum game means if I win, you lose. I want that people think like, how can we create a win-win? I win and you win, and together we are coming better out of this situation. And I'm highly inspired by nature. So there is a very beautiful example that I want to share with you from nature. This is the zebras and the gnu and the wildebeest. They graze together. And the reason why they do that is that the zebras, they see very well, and the wildebeest, they hear very well. So together they notice attacks much quicker, and they can anticipate on that. So I really like these kind of examples, and I think in business we should also find these examples more, right? So I also challenge people to think about the surprising collaborations. Sometimes it's obvious a collaboration, but for instance, when I was working in Barcelona for Vueling, I tried to find a collaboration with IKEA, because IKEA is very good in designing for small spaces, and an airline with its aircraft has a lot of small spaces. So how cool would that be to find solutions of problems we have in an aircraft right now? So I find this extremely important. I already mentioned it quickly earlier on. When I build a team, for me, when you are a leader and you build a team, I think it's your task to create a safe haven for your team members, a place where they feel that they can be themselves and where they can say anything. And the reason why I also find this very important is once people are there, they are in the learning zone. So obviously you don't want people to have your people in the apathy zone or panic zone, but you also don't want them in the comfort zone, right? So I really want to push them to be learners and to be in the learning zone. That everything they do, they learn from it, they get better, and they're very open to grow every time. So when I build teams, I also look at how people are capable of being very open, having this growth mindset. And I want to share with you a video about an experiment where they try to create a super chicken. And this video will be played right now. And I really enjoy Margaret Hefferman, who explains about the super chicken.
An evolutionary biologist at Purdue University named William Muir studied chickens. He was interested in productivity. I think it's something that concerns all of us. But it's easy to measure in chickens because you just count the eggs. He wanted to know what could make his chickens more productive, so he devised a beautiful experiment. Chickens live in groups, so first of all, he selected just an average flock, and he let it alone for 6 generations. But then he created a second group of the individually most productive chickens. You could call them super chickens. And he put them together in a super flock. And each generation, he selected only the most productive for breeding. After 6 generations had passed, what did he find? Well, the first group, the average group, was doing just fine. They were all plump and fully feathered, and egg production had increased dramatically. What about the second group? Well, all but 3 were dead. They'd pecked the rest to death. The individually productive chickens had only achieved their success by suppressing the productivity of the rest.
Well, this is fascinating, right? So I always remember this. When I grow teams, when I develop teams, when I hire people, I look whether they are a super chicken or not, because I don't want super chickens in my team. They are working, they're more productive at the cost of others. So next to making sure there is a safe space for the team, I also make sure that that they're not under a high level of stress, because stress, I don't know if you know, but stress can reduce your thinking brain by 80%. So that's the part of your brain that makes decisions, that is that makes decisions, that is how do you say that? I forgot the word. So, but this part that is very objective, and so that reduces your thinking by 80%. So be aware of stress in your team. However, there's also a way to deal with this. If you perceive stress differently, it reduces its effects. So what happens is that there was an experiment at Stanford where they asked 2 groups of people. One group said, hey, I perceive high level of stress, but I also see stress as problematic for my health. They had 43% more problems with their health and risk for attack, while the people who perceived stress not as harmful for their bodies, they had no extra risks of having a heart attack. So if you don't perceive stress as harmful for your body, it will completely reduce its negative effects. So I find that highly interesting. So for me, I push my teams, but I also urge them to slow down. And how can you do that? So trying to get to the next slide. It's a little bit stuck. So, okay, maybe I can. So, I don't know. My slide is, yeah, here we go. So what I do with my teams, I let them do things out of their comfort zones. And that is all to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. The world is getting really complex. So there is the one thing we know is that we don't know things for sure anymore. So I urge my teams my team members to get comfortable with this ambiguous world we are living in. I want to close off with some experiments. Inside in an experiment about people. So there was an experiment where they let people read a newspaper, and they had to count the number of pictures in this newspaper. And before people started, they asked them, "Do you feel how lucky do you feel?" So what happened is the group of people who felt lucky, they were ready with this assignment in 2 seconds, while the group that did not feel lucky, it took them 2 minutes to find all the pictures in the newspaper. So what happened? They put on the second page a half-page advert where they said, "Stop counting, there are 43 pictures, tell the experimenter that you've seen this and you will win $250. So the people who did not feel lucky just did not see this half-page advert. They just looked over it. So people who feel lucky, they look for opportunities. I have one last video about that I want to share with you guys, because this is actually your world, and see what happens if you have a lucky mindset.
They were comparing lucky with unlucky people. And, you know, they did this experiment where they said, okay, they took one very lucky person, so someone who self-identified as extremely lucky, and someone who self-identified as extremely unlucky. And they did the same thing where they said, okay, walk down the street in the UK, go into a coffee shop, order a coffee, and sit down. And so what they didn't tell them is that the cameras, like there's hidden cameras across the road, there's a £5 note in front of the coffee shop, and there's only 4 tables in the coffee shop, 3 of which there would be actors, and the 4th one is like a super successful businessman who sits right next to the counter. So the lucky person goes down the street, sees the £5 note, picks it up, is super excited, yeah, great, I found money, walks into the coffee shop, orders a coffee, has a conversation with the barista, sits next to the businessman, has a conversation, opportunity comes out of it, and like he makes a friend, right? So that's the lucky person's day. The unlucky person like goes down the street, steps over the £5 note, goes to the counter, orders the coffee, also sits next to the businessman, because that's the only table that's right next to the counter, ignores the businessman, and that's it. And so at the end of the day, they debrief, right? So they ask the lucky person, how was your day? And the lucky person's, well, amazing, I found money in the street, I made 2 new friends, and I got an amazing opportunity. And then they ask the unlucky person, how was your day? Yeah, nothing really happened.
So I think this shows the power of mindset. So how lucky do you feel? It's not easy. You navigate in a complex world, but remember, you can change your mind. It's always about people and about their mindset. So I want to close off with this picture I want to share with you. Whenever you get stuck, please remember that you can change a lot of things by changing how you view things, how you perceive things. And sometimes the thing that is holding you back is all in your head. Thank you for listening to me.
Simone, thanks so much for your session. I will say that, well, in your presentation, you have a great summary of innovation practice principles. And then as I was listening to the presentation, I thought, like, this is great material for a manifesto. You know, this could be beautifully put in a poster and then in the office. And then as you continue, I thought, like, well, no, I think there is enough material here for a book. So a suggestion for you will be, and maybe that's something you already had in your mind, like, you already have the table of contents of a great innovators practitioner book, and I will strongly encourage you to go for it, because there is lots of great insights there. Great summary of innovation principles. I have a couple of questions, and then I'm going to come some questions for the audience. The first one is that you put a lot of effort on the team and the characteristics on the team. You made very clear what is it that you are not looking for. You don't want super chickens, you know, because of the dynamics that you mentioned. But what would you say are the intrinsic characteristics that an individual should have in order to become a great innovation practitioner?
Yeah. Yeah, for me, team and individual are correlated, obviously, right? Because the team consists of individuals. I study a lot about growth mindset. So, and I also show this kind of materials to my to people who work with me or for me, or and what I like about growth mindset a lot is that you are very open to learn, and that you when you get feedback. Often I see people taking feedback as criticism, and then they become angry. But it's actually a gift someone is giving you to learn and to see how you are, where you can improve. What I also like about growth mindset a lot is that you help others to become successful. And this is also, for me, important because, well, this relates to the super chicken, right? It's not that you are successful at the cost of others, but you are there and that you are open and that you help others. I think you also have to be very curious, right? Ask why are things happening, and not curious in only just one specific area, but curious in a very broad range of things. I think my experience is that sometimes I solve problems or I help people in one industry because I take my learnings from another industry. So it's open the radar and get out of the tunnel. Yeah.
Is there, you're talking about this growth mindset, is there any simple exercise that or activity that you will recommend that is an easy way to start developing such a growth mindset?
Ooh, that's a good question. I should add that to the book as well, right?
Exactly. I'll give you some time to think about it.
Yeah.
This is also related to the fact, I was very curious, you show this study by MIT about how people perceive stress. It has a direct impact on how does actually stress affect their well-being. And I found this fascinating. And of course, I cannot avoid by thinking like, well, nature versus nurture, like, is this something that you are born with? Your appreciation of stress, because somehow it's about the flight or fight kind of approach, it's inherent in you, or it's something that can be learned with time. So that caught my attention. And now that you're talking about growth mindset, I'm also thinking, well, is there anything you can do, in order to develop such growth mindset? And sometimes it's about, I don't know, exercises like meditation, or maybe like practice responding in a certain way to certain situations. So any hint there, I think, will be welcome.
Yeah, it's all of that. So some people like to journal. I don't like that myself, so I cannot do that. But sometimes people do yoga or meditate, or what I do is I walk a lot. And I also, what I learned myself is that when I walk and I think about a problem, that is work too. So I don't feel guilty that I am spending an hour outside walking, because that's work. And that also reduces stress level, for instance. The other day, I read a lot about the mind and the brain and how it works. And the more I read, the more fascinated I get. But also the more I understand that we don't actually know. And sometimes experiments from the past that turn out to be not reality. So they were poorly performed experiments, and now everybody believes. For instance, the experiment where they put people in prisons, and then the worst came out of people. Well, actually, the setup of this experiment was not really well, and also the results were manipulated. So for me, it's also about being curious and learn about how is the mind working. But practical exercises, it starts also with awareness. So become aware. First, check the video about growth mindset. That's the first step I would recommend. And hopefully you get curious and say, well, this is actually interesting. And then you will learn more and see more. And that is what I would suggest.
This is very good insight. So thank you very much. We are getting questions from the audience, and we have Antonio Blanco is asking, well, he's saying, thank you, Simona, for such fantastic presentation. As consultant myself, I would like to work for connecting innovation and mind flexibility with career development. Have you ever worked with HR teams in that sense?
Yes, and I'm always fighting with them as well, because how I look at the world is often very different from the more traditional HR teams. So I totally agree that it's connected with team development, with personal development. I also think we need to let go people a little bit and let them flourish and find their talents. And we are way too much in control and trying to control. So if you want to have a little bit more of a chat, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to talk about this. I can spend hours on it.
Well, I'm glad that you say that, and I will say also to Antonio and to anyone attending that has an insider pass that tomorrow, not today, but tomorrow, Simone at 11 will be hosting that insider session through a Zoom call. So I will say it's a great opportunity to go into the call and have a conversation directly with you about this subject and any others. We are getting other questions also. Marta is asking, have you come across companies that don't want to see new perspectives to fill the problem? What have you done in those cases? So what have you done when you go to an organization that probably, in a way, it's saying, I want to do things differently, but when it's reality, they don't?
Well, I think that is the story of my life. And I think everybody who works in innovation encounters this quite often. What I try to do, so this is one of the reasons why I work in 3 horizons, is when I work in Horizon 1, it's actually a lot of times it's problem solving. And the reason why I do that is because I gain trust from the company. They see, hey, I have a problem, someone helps me. So I need that trust to make people start listening to me when we talk about, but what is happening in the future and how is this impacting what we are doing right now? So this is also for me a great way to connect the here and now and the future, and to get people listening to that. I also think that it's a lot about inspiration and bringing inspiration. So what I do is actually with every client I have channels where I share inspiration on trends of the future. So for instance, currently I work for this civil engineering company, and we see that the energy transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy has a big impact on this company. So we start to share small innovations about that, but also trend reports and stuff like that. Starts with opening up, and it's not my story, it's what's happening in the world. So that is a way for me to open up, to get people along.
I will say, connected to this, I will also recommend, maybe you're not going to do, but I will, Simone she has a YouTube channel where she's doing something that I think is very interesting. So she's taking these quotes from TED Talks and other presentations, that they have a powerful message, and sometimes these messages get diluted between the length of a regular TED Talk, if you want. So I will recommend, that's a great source of inspiration. So if you want to get inspiration, you can head to Simone van Nerven YouTube channel when you have these summarized versions of great talks out there. Connected to the question that we just had, I cannot avoid but thinking that these polarities, I have the feeling that most of the tensions that happen within the innovation practice have to do with the fact that you have a traditional organization or established organization with certain dynamics, and then inside that organization you have an innovation team that is doing things in complete different ways. So the tension is intrinsic because you have 2 different ways of dealing together, one inside of the other. And I wonder if the solution for such polarity and tension will be that you take those innovation units and you basically put them outside the organization, so it's not affected for such rules and dynamics and culture. So what would be your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good one. So for me, you have polarities on many different levels. So you also have inner polarities, right? So we as humans want to belong to a tribe, but when you're in the field of innovation, you're also an individual, right? So this is something I feel every day. And then you have polarities with your team, like you explained, but also larger, right? So how do you navigate in these polarities that are happening in this world? Your question about whether to take a team in or outside the company, I recently listened to a very interesting podcast of the former head of innovation of Walt Disney. And he also had a very interesting take on maybe you should not have a team because then everybody feels like, hey, I don't have to innovate. So maybe you should try to create much more of a movement where everybody feels they can innovate. And actually, I'm experimenting with that approach right now with this current Dutch customer. But for me, building the team, for instance, at Vueling or KLM, was very helpful to get things started. So I'm a strong believer there is no one answer to your question. It also comes down to what is the context of this company and what works best. So I think it's very good to, before you start, is to observe quite some time. What is the culture of this company and how do things work? And yeah.
That's great. I think we have time for one last question. Actually, John Rodriguez is asking, who are for you good examples of professionals with an adaptive mindset? And I believe this has to do well, aside of the innovation practice, who is out there that you think is doing very well from the fact of having an adaptive mindset?
Yes, well, if you think really big, I highly admire what Elon Musk is doing. I don't like to give only these well-known people as they are really adaptive, but the reason why I think he is very interesting is he sees, well, he completely disrupted the car business, and he's still doing that, and then he has this open mind AI platform that he has just recently launched, or he's funding that. I think he completely sees what's happening in the world and then coming up with these concepts that tap into movements, and he accelerates these movements. If you join me tomorrow at 11 in my follow-up chat, I might have some more examples. Let me think about it a little bit better this afternoon.
That's
good question. Yeah,
that's great. So, Simone, thank you very much for your time. Few items to recap upon. So basically, if it happens that you have an insider pass tomorrow at 11, Simone will be available for this Zoom call, and I think it's a great opportunity to catch up with her. And you will receive an email tomorrow morning with a link as an insider pass holder. Second thing to take into account also is that we met in the midst of the lockdown with Simone, and we had an hour-long conversation on the practice of innovation. Very interesting, and we will recommend you to recap and to recover that conversation. That's available at the YouTube channel of IQS Tech Factory under the title IQS Tech Factory Talk Series. And we also have it available as a podcast form, so audio only, through Spotify and the Apple Podcast platform. So we recommend you to go there, subscribe, and listen to this conversation and other conversations with innovation and entrepreneurship practitioners. So with that, Simone, I would like to thank you for your time and for joining us today from Amsterdam, and we look forward to the conversation tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.